All right, let's think back to this time last year. We were still wearing masks, but it was a very different scene than today. A lot of places were closed. We weren't vaccinated. Provincial guidelines said only members of a household were allowed to gather in their home. A person who lived alone could go to another household as long as there were fewer than 5 people inside, and it was always the same household. Well, this year, restaurants, gyms, and concert halls are busy. People are making Christmas plans beyond a visit on the front stoop. We've come a long way, but we know we can't let our guard down yet. This month, we had our first case of Omicron variant in Saskatchewan. We're still seeing people dying of COVID-19. People are traveling outside the country, but we're learning that is still quite a hurdle. So what are the risks out there right now, and how can we manage them? Again, today we're joined by Dr. Joseph Blondeau, head of clinical microbiology at the University Hospital in Saskatoon, Royal University Hospital in Saskatoon, and he teaches about microbiology at the University of Saskatchewan. So if you have a question about COVID-19 or the vaccines or Omicron or anything that's on your mind, give us a call. It's 1-800-716-2221. You could email bluesky@cbc.ca or tweet us at blueskycbc. Again, that number to call, 1-800-716-2221. We're also live streaming today's program on the CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages. Ask your question in the comments section, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. And again, welcome to the program, Dr. Blondeau.
Thanks very much, Garth. It's my pleasure to be back on with you.
We're going to go to the phone lines as quickly as we can today, but I do want to ask you this first question. It's an email from Deborah, and I think a lot of people have this on their mind. It's hard to find clear information online about the timing of a COVID self-test following travel. Before spending time with our parents, my sister, who has just arrived by air from the U.S., wants to minimize the risk of passing on any infection that could have theoretically been picked up in the course of her travels. When is the best time to take a rapid antigen self-test after a possible exposure? 48 hours after, 24 hours after? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that we sort of recommend that if there was a potential exposure, if you test yourself right after the exposure, it might not be revealing, but certainly within 48 to 72 hours after potential exposure would be a good time to take the test.
Okay. And this email came from Tim, and Tim writes, if Omicron is more transmissible but less dangerous than other COVID variants, does that mean the virus is evolving into something we needn't be so afraid of, albeit still careful of, much like the flu?
You know what? That's probably going to be one of the better questions of the day, Garth. And the answer to that question is we still don't know the answer to it. I'm not sure if you've seen the headlines today, but the UK has now recorded what it believes to be its first death associated with Omicron. It remains to be seen whether or not the trend that's been observed so far, that being of a virus which appears to be more transmissible but causing milder symptoms, whether that will continue. We probably need more people to be infected to see what the impact actually is. But in theory, it could be that if you had a more transmissible respiratory virus that causes milder disease, then that would be less worrisome than a highly transmissible virus that causes more severe disease. But with Omicron, essentially we're just weeks, since it was first described. That data is still being generated and gathered, and I could give an opinion today and may have to change it in a day or two as new information becomes available in the scientific literature. But yeah, theoretically, what the person who answered the question asked is quite possible.
All right. Okay, let's go to the phone lines. Pat has been waiting patiently. Hi, Pat.
Hello.
Yes, go ahead, Pat.
Hello.
Oh, okay. I have not been able to find an answer to this question. I'm triply vaccinated. The last Pfizer shot I had was in October. And the reason I'm triply vaccinated is because I have an autoimmune disease, namely IPAF. And I'm wondering if it's safe for me to travel to the States.
That is a difficult question to answer, and I'll give you the reasons why. We do believe in people who have autoimmune diseases. Are you on a biological product for your autoimmune disease?
I'm taking mycophenolate, and I discontinued it last week so that I could try to beef up my autoimmune system.
Yeah, so if there are certain medications that people with autoimmune diseases might be taking, particularly biological products, which may serve actually to depress immunity. And because we don't have good serological testing that would tell you whether or not you're protected versus just having antibody, it's very, very difficult to answer this question. In each individual person, we actually don't know how well a person responds to the vaccine, but when we look at the population numbers, we know that as a population, we all respond quite well, just given the level of protective immunity that we see with vaccinated individuals. So on an individual basis, that's a tough question for me to answer for you specifically, because it's hard to know what your actual antibody level happens to be and whether or not it's protective. It's certainly assumed to be protective if you've had at least 2 doses, and certainly if you've had a booster shot. But it's going to have to be an individual decision for you as to whether or not you feel confident in going. And I would say that if you do go, then all of those other types of things that we've been talking about now for almost 2 years about masks and distancing and hand washing will become important with somebody that has an underlying medical condition.
Oh, I never go out of the house without double KN95 masks and a face shield.
Yeah, but do you get my point where I'm coming from? There are antibody tests available, but there isn't a test that will give you a result that says, yes, you are 100% protected, versus a result that will say, well, you're not really that protected even if you have antibody. We just don't have that kind of test available.
Well, that explains why I can't get an answer.
Yeah. I'm sorry I couldn't be more helpful than that, but that is our reality right now.
Okay, thank you.
You're most welcome.
Okay, let's move on to Clem in Saskatoon. Hi, Clem.
Oh, hi, Garth, and thanks to Doctor for doing this show and continuing on almost 2 years now. My question is...
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. My question is, I'm kind of worried about all those new cases in Ontario and Quebec. What's driving them? Is it schools or super spreader events or restaurants and bars or what? Thanks.
It actually could be all of those. We actually don't have a breakdown of that data yet, but we do know if you look at the epidemiological curves, we actually saw that towards coming into October, the end of October into early November, we actually saw from those curves that the numbers were going down. And I think one of the concerns that I always have is that, when we're putting out numbers showing that case numbers are going down, it may in fact actually be an invitation for people to say, well, I'm going to let my guard down, or I'm not going to be as stringent in making sure that I'm protecting myself. And that could contribute as well to the increase in cases. We do have to remember that while all of the news right now is on Omicron, we still have Delta, which is a highly transmissible virus. We know that infects people with high viral loads, and we know that it causes severe disease. We know lots more about Delta than we do about Omicron. And so it could be a combination of all of those things. It could be schools. It could be public facilities where people are gathering, public businesses. And it could be people that are not keeping their guard up. And I think that once that epidemiological data becomes available, it'll become clearer. And I should point out, Garth, and to the caller as well, that if you actually look at the Government of Canada website, and you look at how we get this virus, the vast majority of cases are from being in contact with somebody who's known to be positive or proven to be positive. So it is our interaction with each other which allows this to happen.
All right, Clem?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for the call, Clem. Let's move on to Jerry in Saskatoon. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Garth. It's always good to hear Dr. Blondeau on the show. He's just been a wonderful resource to us for the last couple of years.
Hasn't he, though?
Thank you.
Oh, I have a question, though. My husband and I have both had the first and second and our boosters of Pfizer, and neither of us have had a reaction to the vaccine. Now, does that mean we have immunity or not? And you should also know that as a child, I was vaccinated 3 times for smallpox because I never reacted to any of it. So I don't know if we have a higher immunity or none.
Yeah, well, we make the assumption that that you are, because not everybody experiences the same symptoms. So, I'll give you, for instance, this is a real life one. So, in our family, my wife and I were both vaccinated on the same days for our second and our booster doses. We were on different days for our primary vaccine.
Mhm.
My wife only ever got a sore arm. Me, on the other hand, I was hit a little bit harder. In addition to a sore arm, I was actually quite tired and lethargic for a couple of days. And so we actually hear this mixture from lots of individuals who have been vaccinated, that some don't feel like they've had any side effects whatsoever, and others have said that they've been sort of knocked down for a day or two. But yet we know from the population that we have high levels of immunity, just based on the fourth wave and the fact that that occurred mostly in unvaccinated individuals. So
Right.
I think it's probably safe to assume that you have antibody. How much antibody, nobody knows, but I think it's probably safe to assume that just because you didn't have a reaction to the vaccine doesn't mean that you're not protected.
Okay, well, I did hear you say to the other person that unfortunately there isn't a test to see how much immunity a person does have, which would be nice if we
That
could
is
get
correct.
one. But I do understand.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we'll just continue as we're doing and keep masking and keep on doing the good stuff.
I really appreciate your positive attitude. Thank you.
Okay, bye for now.
Okay, we had a question from Charles on Facebook, and I would imagine lots of folks have this question. Charles writes, I'm curious about the level of protection kids in that 5 to 11 age range have after receiving their first dose of vaccine. I've not seen it reported anywhere, and that came to us from Charles on
No,
Facebook.
and you know what? Thank you for that question too. So, Gareth, I've not seen that data yet either in regards to the level of antibody, but I do know in the trials with kids, there were three elements that were measured. One was safety of the vaccine. The other was that they developed protective antibody. And obviously the third thing was efficacy. So we do know that that data exists. It may simply be that it's just not made its way into the peer-reviewed literature for us to review. So I think it's coming. We just haven't seen it yet. And if it's out there, I haven't found it yet.
All right. We got another email here. This one from Robert. Robert writes, is AstraZeneca still available for a booster shot?
AstraZeneca is still available in this province, yes.
Okay. But he also wonders if he's had 2 doses of AstraZeneca, is either Moderna or Pfizer better for the booster?
Either or will work.
What is the consensus on this now about the booster shot and AstraZeneca as opposed to an mRNA? Are you better off with an mRNA, or do we know?
Well, I mean, we certainly know that there are some countries that still don't recognize the AstraZeneca, and we know that people have gone back and been re-immunized just because they want to travel, and this eliminates a problem. What the official line that I understand is that if you've had Pfizer, you should stay with Pfizer. If you had Moderna, you should stay with Moderna. But scientifically, it probably doesn't matter which one you get. They'll all boost the immune system because they all do the same thing, and that's raise antibody against a spike protein. Whether or not AstraZeneca will continue to be offered for boosters or over the long term, I can't say. I'm not part of that team. Mm-hmm. But certainly if you're booking for a booster shot, that's a question you can ask at the time that you're doing it. And those are the people that would certainly have, the updated information, which may have changed from one day to the next. It's the best answer I can give.
All right. Well, if somebody's had 2 doses of AstraZeneca, then should they request an mRNA as their third shot?
They certainly can, and that might be what's offered to them.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay, I want to share this with you because it's the kind of misinformation that we need to deal with. This came to us from Facebook, and the writer writes, I'd like to know why when people have bad reactions to the vaccine, the media doesn't report it. There seems to be more risk to the vaccine than to COVID, yet we don't hear about the risks. Now, that's the kind of stuff that is floating around out there, and let's address it.
Yeah, so, the vaccines are safe. Have there been rare complications that have been identified and reported? Yes, there have been. So if you look at the AstraZeneca vaccine, there is rare blood clots, and also with the Johnson & Johnson vaccine, which occurred primarily in younger aged women, and at a frequency less than what other interventions could result in blood clots. There have been the issues of pericarditis associated with the mRNA vaccines, but once again, those have been very, very rare and infrequent, and I don't think there have been any deaths associated with that. I'll stand corrected on that point. And most of those tended to be self-resolving over time. But for the vast majority of people, I mean, considering that these other events were exceedingly rare, the vaccines have been shown to be safe and efficacious. So whatever misinformation is out there, one only need to go to a credible website and look up the information, and that information is not being hid, it's being shared so that people can review it.
Yeah. Well, the real canard there, though, is this belief amongst some that the vaccines are more dangerous than the disease.
Well, it's simply not the case. I mean, if we just look at the fourth wave alone, Garth, that we experienced, and even look at Saskatchewan data only, we saw the individuals that were in our hospitals and in our ICUs and who were dying represented about 80%. 80 to 81, 82% of the individuals in this last wave. And these were unvaccinated individuals. And when you looked at vaccinated individuals, the only people that ended up either requiring hospitalization or had more severe disease were people who were partially immunized or people who had not yet achieved full immunity. But at the same time, I'll be the first one to point out that there have been some cases of breakthrough infections where some individuals have died, but those are exceedingly rare as well, and they tend to be in older individuals with underlying medical conditions. So the data is very, very clear for anybody that wishes to look at it with a credible eye, and as that is, the vaccines work. They protect you from severe disease requiring hospitalization, I don't know that there's any further debate around that question.
Fair enough. All right, folks, we're joined again today, as we have been every other Monday for it's almost 2 years now, by Dr. Joseph Blondeau, a microbiologist and head of microbiology at the University of Saskatchewan, the Royal University Saskatchewan Hospital. I got that wrong. The Royal University Hospital, period, and teaches about infectious disease at the University of Saskatchewan. There, I got that straight. Anyway, he's here again today to answer any questions you have about vaccines, Omicron, the pandemic in general. Give us a call with your question. It's 1-800-716-2221. You could email us. It's bluesky@cbc.ca, or reach us on Twitter @blueskycbc. Again, that telephone number for any questions you have about anything related to COVID, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. Now, Bernice is in an interesting position. She writes on Facebook, our first vaccine was an AstraZeneca, followed by 2 Pfizers. Would we be considered as having received a booster?
Yes.
All right. I'm curious about why there'd be 1 AstraZeneca and then 2 Pfizer, but who knows? Sandy emails, all of the conversation I've heard regarding booster shots is about people over 18. What about the group of kids aged 12 to 17 who have received their 2 doses? Will boosters open up to them once the 18-plus group has the opportunity? Or has it not been determined if there's a need for a third shot in the 12 to 17-year-old range?
Here's my definitive answer to that, Garth. Possibly. No, I mean, I think right now there's no doubt that if you're a person with advanced age, the likelihood, particularly with Delta, so we're talking primarily about Delta now, the likelihood that you could end up with severe disease requiring hospitalization is much greater if you're unvaccinated. And anybody with an underlying medical condition with advanced age, as I just mentioned, there's always going to be a concern in that particular group. And so it makes sense that the booster shots will be offered to the most vulnerable individuals first, and then make its way down. So that was Delta. So along comes Omicron, and now Omicron seems to be spreading fairly quickly. As a matter of fact, it's sort of becoming the dominant strain in South Africa, and the projections are it could become the dominant strain in the United Kingdom as well. And with the data coming out indicating that that maybe 3 shots are necessary in order to offer you the same level of protection as, say, 2 shots did with Delta, there is a movement to say, okay, anybody over 18 needs to have a booster shot. I suspect that that will also translate into 12 to 18-year-olds at some point in time. And it could be that we're just accumulating more data here as well, just to make sure. But I think that decision is probably a couple of months down the road, in my opinion, but I could be wrong. But I think it's coming.
Okay. All right. Again, folks, if you have just tuned in, it's our every other Monday. We're joined by microbiologist Dr. Joseph Blondeau to answer your questions about, well, anything COVID-related, really. And our telephone number, as ever, is 1-800-716-2221. The email is bluesky@cbc.ca. The Twitter handle @blueskycbc. Again, that telephone number, as ever, 1-800-716-2221, or email bluesky@cbc.ca. We're also live streaming today's conversation on our CBC Saskatchewan and CBC Saskatoon Facebook pages. If you're following along on Facebook, you can put your question in the comments section, and we'll get to them as quickly as we can. And again, that telephone number, 1-800-716-2221. Back to your questions and the doctor's answer in just a moment, but right now, Tori Gillis has a news update for us. Hello, Tori.
Hey there, Garth. Well, coming up in your news, in Saskatoon this morning, there was a fire on a fence, and Saskatoon firefighters are now warning about the dangers of having a barbecue too close to your house or fence. Nobody was hurt in this case, but initial investigation found the barbecue had been turned off properly. However, it reached 700 degrees before it was shut off and was installed too close to that fence, which eventually caught fire. More details on that coming up in your news. Also in Saskatoon, a year-long study on eating disorders in teens and children in Saskatoon is showing that during the pandemic, there's been increases in outpatient referrals and in hospital admissions. We'll hear from Dr. Aisha Kurji, who led that study. That's all coming up in your news.
Okay. Thanks very much, Tori.
Thanks, Garth.
Tori Gillis is back at 1 o'clock with complete details on those and other stories. Okay, back to our conversation. We're joined again today by microbiologist Dr. Joseph Blondeau to answer your questions about, well, anything COVID-related, really. Our telephone number, as ever, is 1-800-716-2221. And during our news break, a lot of calls came in, so let's go straight to the phone lines. We'll start with Dave in Saskatoon. Hi, Dave.
Hi. A couple of things. I've been sitting and stewing on these things for about a month now, and hesitating to call. And then when I finally heard Dr. Blondeau say breakthrough case today, a minute ago, I thought, oh my God, I have to call, because I think there's no such thing as a breakthrough case. I'm triple vaccinated, and let's say I go and I get exposed to somebody. It isn't anything to do with my 3 vaccinations that I get something from somebody. There would have to be a whole lot of work and research put into that to determine whether or not that was the case. So I'd like to just throw out that I think a breakthrough case is a misnomer.
You're gonna have to go a little deeper into that, Dave, because I'm not sure that we clearly understand your question or your concern.
Okay. In terms of the astronomical number of people who are protected by being vaccinated, suddenly this story comes out that somebody who was vaccinated got it, and therefore that's a breakthrough case. Mm-hmm. I don't think so.
Oh, okay. I can address that. We could be talking about the same thing. Who knows? This is a terminology that has evolved to describe somebody who is considered to be vaccinated who ends up becoming infected with the virus. Now, it could happen a bit more often than we think, but maybe most people are mildly symptomatic or not symptomatic at all. But there's some clear evidence from the United States where they have a very, very big database. And we have a similar database in Canada, but the United States one came out in September, where it was released from over 181 million Americans that were considered to be fully vaccinated. So they had 2 vaccines. And there were 19,000 cases of individuals who were fully vaccinated who became infected with COVID that required hospitalization. Of those 19,000, about 14,500 did not die, so they were treated in hospital and then released home. But there were some 4,400 individuals who actually died. So these were individuals who were double vaccinated but became infected with COVID. Now, there are two things here. The first thing is that maybe they were vaccinated and they didn't have the level of protection that say, somebody else might have. Or for whatever reason, maybe their antibodies waned quicker than, say, somebody else's. I don't know that we would know the answer to those things. But these were what were called breakthrough infections. And it's the terminology that has evolved and is currently used in the literature to talk about somebody who is vaccinated and who subsequently gets infected. Whether it's the right terminology or not, I'm not sure. But that is where that terminology comes from.
Okay, we're going to move on to Jackie in Saskatoon. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, I'm just wondering if there's any information about when the vaccine for younger kids is coming. I've got a daughter who's 1.
Yep, thank you for that. And I think I can hear her in the background.
There she is.
So what I know is that there was supposed to be some data released towards the end of the year, so the end of December, in regards to information on those children under 5 years of age in vaccine trials. I haven't seen an update to that, but that will be the first step, is to actually see what data is available. And what it's actually looking like. Realistically, I think that we're probably not going to see much on this until early in the new year. And then it could be obviously then, another month or two beyond that before, a vaccine would be approved. And as you would imagine, the watchdog groups that oversee this information will be looking very, very closely in this younger age group to make sure that the vaccines are indeed safe and that there was nothing that there was any concern about. But I don't think we're going to have a lot of information much before the end of the year.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
You're most welcome.
Got an email here from Corey, and in a nutshell, Corey wants to know, are the people who choose not to be vaccinated taking up the most ICU beds?
They were in the fourth wave. That is correct. But we also have to remember, Garth, that there were some individuals who had a very prolonged stay in ICU that may still have been there before the fourth wave. But the data both in Saskatchewan and across the country was that the fourth wave was primarily due to unvaccinated and those individuals that required ICU admission and mechanical ventilation. Once again, somewhere in the range of that 82% of individuals were unvaccinated.
Okay. Now, Justine has a question here. It's quite technical, and I'll do my best to pronounce these words properly. But Justine writes, would latent factor V heterozygous, a clotting disorder, make me a candidate for a booster now? The doctors don't seem to think it makes me as much as a high risk as some other conditions.
Yeah, I know that the government has an expert group that looks at individuals in order to determine whether or not a specific condition is considered to be at risk. And if you were identified, you would have received a letter indicating that you were eligible to go and receive your booster. So if in fact you haven't received a letter, it would mean that you did not make that list. But I would actually ask the question again, just in case it was possible that you were missed. I think people with underlying medical conditions, not every one of them are at an elevated risk for severe infection, but some clearly are. So, and in yours in particular, I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay, let's go to the phone line. Mike is in Saskatoon. Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Yeah, go ahead.
My son just turned 11 in November, and he doesn't have no underlying conditions, health conditions or anything. I was just wondering, if he gets his first COVID vaccine right now, and then he waits like 2 months or 8 weeks later to get the second one, after he's 12, does he go again to get his full dose?
No, he wouldn't get a booster dose until well, first of all, it's not recommended in his age group right now. So he would get his first dose and then approximately 28 days later get his second dose. And then if a decision is taken on any further doses, then that will be communicated, but it isn't at this point in time. Garth, I will point out that there are discussions that are going on right now amongst different expert working groups as to whether or not the boosters might become a regular part of life for the foreseeable future. So, there are some discussions that are already occurring about the possibility of fourth doses in certain patients, and then whether or not that would extend to a broader population will really depend on what happens with both Delta and with Omicron.
So, like when he turns 12 in less than 12 months, he goes and gets the full dose, like adult dose?
Oh, yeah, that's a really great question. I'm going to have to reach out to one of the vaccine coordinators for that, but I would suspect if he's 12, then he would get the full dose.
So he gets 2 mediocre doses and then the full dose when he's 12?
Well, actually, it's not a mediocre dose. The dose that was recommended for children that 5 to 11 age group, there were actually dosing studies done in order to determine the dose that would provide efficacy and neutralizing antibody. And so no, they have not gotten a lesser product. They just got an age-appropriate product. So I don't think you should be concerned that there was a lesser product. But certainly when he gets to be 12, and if in fact booster shots become available in that age group, then certainly he would fit into the dosing regimen for that age group.
And another thing is, if he catches COVID, say from school and everything else, and I've like other kids have had it and they got sent home and everything else and recovered all fine, are natural antibodies better than this booster?
Yeah, so the work that was actually done looking at individuals that were naturally infected versus those that were immunized showed that depending on how severely ill you were with a natural infection actually had an impact on what your antibody response was. Whereas if you were immunized, where those studies were measured, immunized individuals had much more robust antibody responses. So I think I would have to answer this question by saying that the antibody response after immunization was more robust than after natural infection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
You're welcome.
I got a note here that our Facebook live feed just crashed. We're looking into what we can do about it. We're going to try to get it up and running. Again, we're going to have that back up momentarily. But if you were following us on Facebook and suddenly it's all frozen up, just give us a call on the telephone. It's 1-800-716-2221. And again, folks, we have a few lines open right now. So if you have any question at all that's related to COVID or the vaccines or the Omicron variant or just any concerns you have, Dr. Joseph Blondeau is with us again. He's a microbiologist who teaches about infectious disease at the University of Saskatchewan. Our telephone number for your questions is 1-800-716-2221. You could email bluesky@cbc.ca or reach us on Twitter @blueskycbc. But again, that telephone number, and again, we have a couple of lines open right now, 1-800-716-2221. Okay, you got this question on Facebook, and I'm going to share it with you, and maybe you can make more sense of it. But what about cancer patients who got the AstraZeneca and had a reaction mainly due to their cancer? I'm very concerned the doctors are not allowed to give exemptions as instructed by the college. All right.
I don't know what that means.
I don't know what it means either. So maybe
I'm sorry.
maybe Ksenia could try again. Drop us a line or give us a call, and maybe with a little more detail we can help you out on that one. This question comes
even
from...
if it's after the sorry, Garth. Even if it's after the show, if that question comes through, I can try and find that answer and send a note back to you.
Oh, okay, great. Thanks very much. Okay, and we got this question from Cheryl. Cheryl writes, my grandson got his first vaccine at 11. He has severe atopic dermatitis. He went to a dermatologist a week later and was put on prednisone.
Steroid.
It looks like.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, steroid. So does he now have as much protection because the prednisone weakens the immune system?
Yeah, well, it's not likely that he's on a lot of prednisone, although I can't say that for sure. But it would really depend on how much drug he's getting and what the impact is on immunity. So it's not a question that you can just answer yes or no, because it's a multifactorial question. It really depends on dose as well and the duration of therapy. If it's a topical steroid, that's very, very different than if it's a systemic steroid as well. So But once again, even with steroid therapy, we recognize that this individual will have some level of protection. So too many variables in that question to answer yes or no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, let's go back to the phone lines. Caitlin is on the line in Saskatoon. Hi, Caitlin.
Hi there.
Hi, go ahead, Caitlin.
Okay, hi. So I'm wondering, kind of a personal situation, what your thoughts on, if you could speculate, I know you can't give a definitive answer, but if you could speculate what kind of protection my daughter might have. She got COVID, the original version, I assume, in November of 2020, and I was still breastfeeding her at the time. And I did not get COVID, so I tested negative. Well, I'm assuming I tested negative twice with a PCR test. And then I continued to breastfeed her until I was fully vaccinated. So about a month after I was fully vaccinated, I stopped breastfeeding her. I'm just wondering, what kind of protection do you think she might have? And I know it's fully speculation.
So she's too young to be vaccinated?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Right.
So yeah.
But she's had COVID though.
Yes, and I breastfed her while she was infected, and then all continuing through while I was vaccinated. Right.
So I don't know. You know what? I'm going to ask you if you'll allow me to look this up, because I don't know what the data is on transfer of immunity through breast milk. We do know that for other things that obviously occurs, but I don't know specific data related to COVID. I've never been asked that question before. But going back to the basics, first of all, if she was naturally infected, she would have some level of immunity. And the body does something that during an infection, it produces something called memory cells. And memory cells are cells that are there in case an individual requires the same stimulant that it had the first time they were infected, and we call those antigens. And so if your daughter was reinfected with the virus, then her memory cells should kick in and she should have a faster immune response. That's called the amnestic response. So every one of us would have that capability. But the fact that she's not immunized would, there would be a concern that her antibodies would wane over time, because they do with this particular virus, as they do for other types of infectious diseases. But the question the part that I don't know the answer to is what type of protection might be offered to her through breast milk. And I'd have to do a little work on that and then try and get an answer back to you.
Well, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
I will. I've taken a note, so I will get that done.
Interesting question. Thanks so much, Caitlin.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Kabeel is in Saskatoon. Hi, Kabeel.
Hi. Thank you for taking my call. My question about Johnson & Johnson vaccine in Saskatchewan, why it's not available, and if they decided to bring it, so when we can get this option?
I actually think it is now available in the province. I don't know how much is here. I would have to consult with one of my colleagues to see if I know it was coming, if we actually physically have it. And if we have it, then it would be available.
So do you know which locations? Because I checked with Shobar, some pharmacies, they say they don't have it. So
no, but I'm just going to I'm trying to get that answer for you within the next couple of minutes. So if I get it, I will share it with Garth.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time. Thank you.
Stay tuned, Kabeel. Thanks for the call. Got this question from Angela, and I want to share this with you because it might lead to an interesting conversation. Angela writes on Facebook, what is the link between COVID and pericarditis? Strange coincidence, perhaps, but I'm fairly certain I had COVID in early March 2020 after having traveled internationally. I then had 2 very painful bouts of pericarditis, which sent me to the hospital and took several weeks to ease each time.
Yep.
Just a coincidence?
Possibly, or it could be, because we know that pericarditis and myocarditis are caused by other infectious agents as well. Other virus, for example, called Coxsackie virus, which is an intestinal virus. can be associated with these conditions as well. So it's possible it could be due to something else. The actual pathophysiology with the vaccine and how it is associated with pericarditis following vaccination, the last I looked, it wasn't fully elucidated as to what that mechanism was, but clearly there's an association there. So very, very difficult to answer in your specific case as to whether it was vaccine related or some other factor. But that's the best I can do with that.
Yeah, because it sounds like the date given in the email, it would have been before vaccines were readily available. So I guess the nub of the question is, can you get pericarditis as a symptom or as an effect of COVID?
Well, there are cardiac manifestations of COVID, and so the answer is yes.
Okay. Let's go to Randy in Saskatoon. Hi, Randy.
Hi. What is the changes that viruses like this make to become more infectious or more easily passed on? I'm just curious how it mutates and what kinds of changes go on within the actual creature itself.
Okay, so this gives us a great chance to chat about Omicron again for a moment. So there's some data that's been submitted for publication. It's been released as a preprint, but not yet out. And it's just because it's not been fully peer reviewed yet. But we know that a virus can mutate because of a genetic error that occurs when the nucleic acid is replicating. And we actually do know the frequency with which this could occur. We know that in bacteria, for example, that a mutational event can occur sometime between every 10 million to a billion cells, which sounds like a lot, but it's actually not. In the microbial world, 10 million bacterial cells is not very many at all. And so we know that's one way that you just have an error in replication of the nucleic acid. The other way, though, is that you can pick up genetic material from another source. And with Omicron, there's now a little bit of evidence to suggest that it might have picked up some genetic material from another coronavirus, which is associated with the common cold, one that we would see here in the absence of the pandemic that causes colds-like symptoms every year or every second year. And so when it picks up that new genetic material, depending on what that genetic material encodes for, will determine what the impact is going to be on the virus. So if you're looking for a virus that's more transmissible, it would have to acquire some feature that would allow it to attach to our epithelial cells better than, say, what another virus might do. The other way that it may increase its transmissibility or acquire these new features is the amount of virus that a person might be infected with if they're symptomatic. And so we refer to that as a viral load. So during this process of mutation, a virus could pick up characteristics that could actually help it with its spread, but it could also pick up mutations which are lethal to it, and those viruses would die off. But it really depends on what the genetic material is that it acquires or how that genetic material changes as to what the new properties of the virus are going to be.
Wow. Very complex. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks for the call, Randy. Just a quick note here, the intrepid Tori Gillis did some investigating, and it sounds like the J&J vaccine is only available at some Regina and Saskatoon locations at the moment. Tori did a search of the SHA website, which can filter vaccine types. That's www.sask Health Authority. And so, again, it looks like J&J is available in limited quantities, but only in Regina and Saskatoon at this point. All right.
And Garth, in Saskatoon, it's available at Prairieland.
At Prairieland. Now, is Prairieland still walk-in, or do you need an appointment? Do you know?
Well, because of the immunization with the children, the last time I checked, you had to have a phone in. But that's an easy thing to do. Just call and find out whether it's a walk-in. But when I was looking to go for my booster, I wanted to do a walk-in. I couldn't do it. They just said no slots are available, and that's because of the immunization program with children right now. A lot of these slots being taken up. So
okay, and what are the options with pharmacies?
So pharmacies are usually taking by appointment.
Okay. Okay, let's go back
Garth,
to the... sorry, go ahead.
Just wanted to also let you know that AstraZeneca is not currently available in the province.
Okay.
And anybody that had AstraZeneca, the recommendation is for messenger RNA as a booster.
So either
I just
Pfizer or
text
Moderna.
the pandemic chief lead and got those responses back.
Okay. Let's go to Bob, east of Saskatoon. Hi, Bob.
Hi. Just had a question. My adult son had both shots the first time were Pfizer, and both times he had a fairly down, not feeling good for a couple of days each time. For his booster, do you think there'd be any advantage in him going to a Moderna or some other vaccine for the booster?
No. What we're recommending is that if you've had Pfizer, you stay with Pfizer. If you had Moderna, you stay with Moderna. It sounds to me like your son had the same types of issues that I had after my first, second, and third dose. Was that it kind of kicked me around for a couple of days, but then I was back to myself within the third day. So my symptoms after my booster dose were very similar to what I had after my first and second dose.
Okay. Yeah, that describes him. Kind of got better around for a few days.
Yeah. But you know what? I'll take that over getting the disease any day.
Yeah.
Okay. Bob, thanks for the question.
Thank you very much.
I got an email from Anna, and I think Anna is probably representing a group of folks out there. Anna writes, my 11-year-old has a fear of needles and is refusing to get the COVID vaccine. When I bring up the topic to discuss solutions, he just gets very upset and is unable to express himself. Any tips, or should I just wait till he's ready?
Well, it's hard to answer that question, but Garth, I think that's encountered a fair amount at the vaccine centers where there's some hesitancy because fear of needles is actually a very common problem. It's not an uncommon problem, and it's not only a problem in children, it's a problem in adults as well. Mm-hmm. And some of the folks that are actually administering vaccines at the vaccine centers are really, really good at this. I think a lot of people will say that I went there, I talked to some people who have a fear of needles and said, I didn't even know I received the needle. And so I think that there might be ways of having somebody who's knowledgeable in this area speaking with that child in order to help alleviate some of the fears. There is obviously the option to wait as well until they make up their mind, but then that runs the risk that the person become naturally infected when they could be protected. So.
Just a quick note from producer Abby. There are numbing patches you can get at pharmacies, which have been very popular. Abby knows of 3 families who have used them with pretty good success. So there's a thought, Anna. Okay, and Shalinda emails, if you are naturally infected, the virus would enter your body via your respiratory system. So why aren't the vaccines administered intranasally?
That could possibly come at some point in time. We don't have it now. There's 2 things to consider. If you have an intranasal inoculation, the one thing you don't want to do is you don't want to have just a mucosal antibody. So that's the antibody that's present just in your nose, in your mouth, etc. Because that type of antibody is an antibody called IgA, and we know that antibody is short-lived and it doesn't last very long. When you're actually getting an injection into your arm, your body is producing IgG antibody, which is the antibody that circulates in your blood and it protects you from more severe infection. So that's part of the explanation, but whether or not we will see either a pill or a nasal formulation in the future remains to be seen.
Okay, I'm gonna want to deal with this one because it's another one that's out there that has to be dealt with. And this is from Gene, who says, my nephew isn't concerned about getting the COVID vaccine. He says he's boosting his immune system with vitamins. It isn't possible to boost your immune system with vitamins, is it? That came
not
Gene.
For this. No. I mean, there are lots of claims out there about supplements and whatnot that can boost your immune, make you feel better and whatnot. But that has nothing to do with being immunized for a specific infectious disease agent like COVID. Those 2 things are not linked.
Yeah. And quickly, let's do this one. Is it safe to go back to yoga studios and other exercise facilities where you are allowed to unmask while practicing? I've had 2 shots, but I'm concerned about exposure while exercising, giving waning immunity, new variants, etc.
Yep. So, Garth, quickly, in the gym that I go to, you're allowed to do the same thing, but they have marked off areas of the floor, and you stay within the area of the floor that you're marked off in, and it keeps you at a safe distance from the person that's in the spot alongside of you. And I think that's the best option. So maintain distancing when you're in your exercise space.
All right. Dr. Blondeau, thanks again for your time, and we'll talk again in the new year.
It's my pleasure, and a very happy holidays to everybody out there, and thank you for continuing to invite me on to try and answer some of these questions.
Well, thank you, sir. And just a quick note, folks, Dr. Blondeau will not be here in 2 weeks. We're going to take a break for the holidays, and he'll be back in the new year, so stay tuned. The beef industry's role in climate change is a contentious topic on the prairie because there are so many factors to account for, including our grasslands, the science of methane gas, to how the cattle industry compares to ones in the rest of the world. So on tomorrow's Blue Sky, we'll dive into all these topics. We'll talk about beef farming and climate change. That's tomorrow on Blue Sky. Talk to you then.